What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, and today I am joined by fellow Oscar betting expert Collin Whitchurch. You can find him on social media at Church, no spaces, and we're going to discuss the 97th annual Academy Awards. We're going to go through all the key categories, the best bets, any long shots we like, and some of the more obscure categories. There's some chalk we like as well. Colin's got some exotics for you, so should be a good show. Buckle up. Collin, how's it going?
Going great, Chris. I'm so excited to be here. About a month ago, the NFL had their Super Bowl. That's your Super Bowl as one of the top NFL betting analysts in the game. The Super Bowl is the Super Bowl for everyone. This is my Super Bowl. The Oscars are my Super Bowl. I've been tracking this stuff for months and every year for almost 2 decades now. So I'm ready to get down here, discuss all of these categories, and hopefully make some money along the way.
I love it. I'm excited too. This is always a nice come down from, I specialize in the NFL for people that don't know me. So this is always kind of a nice come down to model something completely unrelated and just kind of bet a market that's completely unrelated, but a lot of fun, and you get to see some cool films along the way. So we're gonna get into it. We'll start with the top 8 categories, and then we'll go from there. We do have a lot of bets, so a lot to get to. Before we dive in to the category, starting with Best Picture, just a heads up that we're going to be referencing a platform called KALSHI today, a lot in this episode. And KALSHI isn't a sports book. It is the only legal prediction market in the United States. So it's a platform that's more like the stock market. It's legal. It's available in all 50 states. I think there are still 50 states, right? For now. So on Kalshi, you deal in trades instead of bets. You can buy positions at different percentages. Something I really like about Kalshi is that you don't even see odds. You see straight up percentages, very helpful there. And when a market like Academy Award for Best Picture settles, when the Oscar is finally given out, the losers move to 0% and the winning position moves to 100%. If you were on that position, then you cash. So very similar to betting, but you're just using the implied probabilities instead of American odds. So for example, if you buy a best picture candidate at 20%, but that position goes to 40% by Saturday night, you can sell your position and take all of that profit right away without even waiting for the award ceremony. So very cool stuff. And because we were doing this episode anyway, we asked Kalshi for a promo code. So if you sign up and deposit and use the promo code ACTION, that's ACTION, you get a $10 credit to use on Kalshi. Promo code or not, though, we definitely recommend checking it out. It's very cool. And again, I think the key is it is legal and available in every single United States. And the amount of markets that you can bet, I think it'll blow your mind. So be sure to check out Kalshi. That's KALSHI. All right. Let's start off with the Best Picture nominees. Collin, it looks like a 3-film race at this point. So if we look at the Kalshi percentages, we have Anora in the lead, 64%, Conclave at 23%, and The Brutalist at 14%. What are your thoughts on the field here and specifically these 3 films? How you think it's going to play out?
Yeah, so I'll do a little bit of stage setting here before I get into my pick. Um, Months ago, this category, The Brutalist, was the runaway favorite in this category. Probably entering the new year, which was kind of the official start of award season right before the Golden Globes. You could see The Brutalist favored in the minus 250 to minus 300 range. Anora was trending in like the third and fourth position. And then late January happened. It was the weekend of the NFL's conference championship game while we were watching the Chiefs destroy the Bills' hopes and dreams. 3 big award shows happened: the Critics' Choice Awards, the Producers Guild Awards, and the Directors Guild Awards. Anora won all 3. It wasn't expected to win all three. I don't think it was expected to win one, but it won all three, and it immediately jumped to the front of the line as the favorite. 12 of the 15 films to win all three of those awards, the CCA, the PGA, and the DGA, have won Best Picture. Anora also won the Writers Guild Awards, importantly, and the only film to win at the guilds for the writers, the producers, and directors and lose Best Picture was Brokeback Mountain. It's only happened once. Now, that has obviously led to a ton of Anora momentum. The other film that has gained momentum at the Brutalist's expense is Conclave. It won Best Picture at the BAFTAs. It won the top prize at the Screen Actors Guild. 7 of the 9 films to win both of those have won Best Picture. So whoever wins Best Picture here, it's going to break a streak of certainty in the other direction. There's a recent comparison here in 2018. 3 billboards outside of Ebbings, Missouri, one at the BAFTAs and at the SAG. Shape of Water won both the Producers and Directors Guilds. Best Picture went to Shape of Water. That's a point in Anora's favor. I want to talk a little bit about The Brutalist. As I mentioned, the momentum has gone completely against The Brutalist over the last 2 months. But I think that there is a path here to The Brutalist winning, and I think it is probably worth a sprinkle, even if your primary bet remains on Anora. There's a good chance that The Brutalist cleans up a little bit in some of the technical categories. It's favored to win Best Cinematography, Best Original Score. It has a shot in a couple other categories like Best Film Editing. It's also the favorite for Best Actor, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. The only Best Picture that The Brutalist won at any of these major televised precursor awards was the Golden Globes, which doesn't really have much parallel with the Academy's voting anymore. There is a comparative example of this happening, though. Like I mentioned, 2018 with the BAFTAs and SAG against the PGA and DGA. In 2017, Moonlight. Everyone who watched the Oscars remembers the famous Moonlight La La Land moment. In 2017, Moonlight won at the Golden Globes. Every other award show was won by La La Land, with the exception of, I think, one was won by Hidden Figures. Entering the Oscars, the day of the Oscars, Moonlight was around plus 550 to win Best Picture. La La Land was in the minus 600 range. And if you go to Gold Derby, which I know you're going to cite quite a bit today, Chris, 35 of the 37 experts and editors at Gold Derby picked La La Land to win Best Picture that year. As we all know, Moonlight won Best Picture. So, like I said, everything is pointing toward a Anora win. I think that in the minus 200 range, Anora is actually worth a bet, probably the primary portion of whatever you're going to allot toward Best Picture. But The Brutalist sitting in that plus 700 range, I think that's certainly worth a sprinkle. I bought it on KALSHI when it was at 13%, just in case, we see a shocker on Sunday night. I will also say that the correlated odds here don't really make a lot of sense. If you're saying 13% plus 700, based on the percentage chance that it has, that doesn't really add up, but that's going to be the case a lot in Oscar betting. It's a lot different from sports betting. There's a winner, and then everyone else is a loser, and you don't even know how close your bet came to winning. You can't say like, oh, I bet this guy to go over 70 rushing yards and he got 69 and a half, and there's bad luck happened, so I didn't win. That's not the case in Oscar voting. There is no almosts in Oscar voting. These votes have already happened. We just have to wait to find out. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. There's a lot of uncertainty this year in general. It's one of the most uncertain Oscar years I've come across in a long time. We'll get to that in a lot of categories here. But yeah, Anora, rightful, deserving favorite. I think The Brutalist has a little bit better chance than people expect. Conclave, who knows? I think you're going to talk a little bit about Conclave, but those are my 2 official positions, are on Anora and a sprinkle on The Brutalist.
I love this because, first of all, you just showed everyone exactly why you're on this podcast and featured expert, because that was just like a ridiculous breakdown, just going off top too. So I approach this a little bit different, and the way I approach it is by kind of treating Gold Derby as the quote unquote sharps, to kind of draw another one of those parallels between sports betting. Now, in real sports betting, I'm never following sharps or anything. Like I'm just doing my own thing, but I know that some people may look at, what they're doing, or maybe even consider myself a sharp. So I get that there's people spending time looking at this stuff, and those opinions, being able to synthesize those, are extremely valuable. And so what I've done is I've actually, every year I run the numbers and keep adding to my model on the Gold Derby predictions themselves, because you have experts, you have editors, you have top 24 users from the year before, all, and then just every user on the site, more like the, you know, the general public or the squares, so to speak. Everything is tracked, and you can kind of see, and it's been tracked for over a decade now. So it starts to really kind of reveal, you know, where the consensus, you know, may be off, where the experts are really sharp, and you shouldn't go against them, and you can kind of put some numbers to it. And that's what you really need to do. Is this you know, betting these awards, it's really hard to find those like true odds, right? Like it's really hard to prove. Like, we don't see what's going on behind the scenes. Only, I guess, what is it, PricewaterhouseCoopers or whoever does it, they're the only ones that can see that. So what I've found is with Best Picture, it's really fascinating, because the consensus favorite, which would be Anora, is on a 4-year win streak in terms of Gold Derby, meaning, like, you know, the number one film that all the experts had as the number one consensus wise, it's won 4 years in a row. However, the previous 5, the number 2, the runner-up, essentially, the projected runner-up, won each of those. So it went from, you know, the upset for 5 straight years to the favorite for 4 straight years. But I think we could see it go back to being an upset again. And the reason I do is because if you look at, and I do think Anora should be the favorite, I just think it's overvalued. And I think Conclave is a little bit undervalued, because when you look at the Brutalist also factoring in, and remember, it's a preferential ballot. I think there's a real chance that, you know, with Conclave, you know, getting more nominations than Anora, but not getting that director nomination, it might be one of those weird years where, like, there starts to be these correlated ways of voting among the voting body, where they're going to say, okay, you know, both of these films are kind of even to us, so we're going to reward Anora and, you know, and Baker for director. But we've seen them kind of go a little bit off the map sometimes when there's just like a good film that doesn't fit the standard precursor, you know, things we've kind of come to know in the past. And you kind of alluded to it with, yeah, you have a 12 and 15 trend for Anora, but you also have a 7 and 9 trend for Conclave. So I just think it's a little bit more of a toss-up, especially when you consider the preferential ballot, especially when you consider that there's this third film kind of hanging around that could, you know, hurt the favorite, I think, more in a case like this. So I'm going to go with Conclave at plus 240. That's where I'm seeing the value, you know, in terms of Gold Derby. You have about 30 to 35%, a little under, you know, at Gold Derby taking Conclave. And what you see too is the users at Gold Derby, like, that means like anyone who wants, like, I could go and you know, put in a vote and put my preferential order in. Anyone can. But for the actual experts on the site, it's about double what just the general public thinks. So I do think Conclave has been a little bit underrated in a year where I don't think there's that true runaway Best Picture nominee. Like, just the fact that there's 3, the fact that, you know, as you mentioned, at different points in the season, different films have been, you know, at the top. And even the Brutalist, I think, you know, there's some kind of artificial deflation, because, you know, who knows? It's hard to predict how an entire voting body is going to react to some scandal that may or may not mean anything, you know, as far as that AI stuff. So I just think there's a lot of uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, I tend to shy away from the juiced up odds, and I tend to try to go for the long shot. So I'm with you on the Brutalist. And for people that are, you know, listening to this pod and not really familiar with betting, to listening to it because you want to find some Oscars picks, when Collin says, you know, sprinkle a little on the Brutalist, that means you can take your Anora or your Conclave at whatever odds, and let's say you put, you know, $10 on your main pick, you can still put let's say $2 on the Brutalist, and because you're getting paid out, 7-1, if you're essentially covered in 2 out of the 3 scenarios, you just have to eliminate the one. And for me, I'm just going with the 2+ money ones. That's just with the uncertainty again. That's just how I'm playing it. I do think Honora should be the favorite. I just think it should be a little bit closer to a toss up, and they kind of have it running away, as is the case with these kind of markets where you don't know the true odds. But that's my kind of reasoning there. But
yeah,
this is a fun one this year with best.
Yeah, I will say, like if you're the most common way I think people wager on the Oscars is in pools. You're picking winners. To be clear, if I'm in an Oscar pool, I'm picking Honora to win Best Picture because Honora has the highest probability chance of winning. Maybe you want to go a little bit outside the box. You think everyone's going to pick Honora. That's where I would pivot to maybe the Conclaves or the Brutalists. I think that there is and in Oscar betting in general, upsets are pretty rare at the Oscars. Out of 23 categories or whatever, you might see 2 to 4 a year. The key is just identifying where those upsets are going to be. And so that's where you sprinkle on a couple of underdogs that you think might be a little undervalued, because that's where because you're just looking to find those underdogs. And this year in particular, as I alluded to kind of at the top, I think we could see even more upsets just because there is more uncertainty, especially across like probably the top 4 categories here. There's no sure thing in picture, director, or either of the 2 top acting categories. And I can't remember the last time that was the case entering the weekend of the Oscars.
Yeah, and I can actually put some numbers to it because, again, this is why I find tracking Gold Derby so valuable. So if we go back to 2011, and let's just assume that like the number one, predicted winner on Gold Derby, the consensus there lines up with the betting markets. It usually does. There'll be a couple of situations where it doesn't, which is where we're going to find some big value, and we'll talk about those. But so on average, the consensus, the favorite, whatever you want to call it, the front runner wins about 76% of the time going back to 2011. So you say about 23 categories. It's about 5 to 6 upsets per year. And I will say this: there's been no category where an upset has been more likely than Best Picture. So that's kind of why I love to, kind of right off the bat, go with some longer shots at Best Picture, because there were some years where it just wasn't fun at all. I mean, I think last year
Oppenheimer,
you couldn't even bet on Oppenheimer, and I don't even know if I told you my I just had a whole thing with Oppenheimer where I started watching it and I was like 2.5 hours in, realized I wasn't paying close enough attention. Literally had to go back and restart it. So I ended up spending like 7-8 hours of my life on this film that I couldn't even really profit off of it because it was running away with like every single category.
Well,
and even if I wanted to put like my entire bankroll on it, the books just won't let you.
Nah. Did you sit through the Brutalist this year?
I did not. I kind of this year I kind of treated it a little more like I'm watching, film for a sport, and I kind of watched it and skipped around and get some 2x, and I'm a maniac, so I watched
it had an intermission. It was 3 hours and 40 minutes. I thought it. I shout out to the Music Box Theater, my local indie theater that I am a member of and see everything here in Chicago. They had an intermission, which is great. It's a really old crumbly theater, and formerly crumbly. They've renovated it. It's beautiful, but I could not. I'm 6'3". I'm not a small man. I could not have sat in those seats for 3 hours and 40 minutes straight. Bless them for putting an intermission in that movie. I loved The Brutalist, to be clear, but 3 hours and 40 minutes, just like Oppenheimer last year, going 3 hours plus. Get some editor. We could talk about the editing category later. Get some editors on these films. We don't need 3+ hours on all these films. Maybe I'm just getting old. It's tougher for me to sit still.
Get some of those COVID updates to your theater too. I feel like every movie theater I've been to since COVID has just had like the best seating. Like it's been like leather recliner chairs.
Like, not the old school ones though. Not the old school ones.
All right. I mean, we're gonna need an intermission now. We keep rambling on about this one category, so let's move on. We got a lot of bets to get to. this year, because I do think there's going to be more upsets than usual. So let's go to the aforementioned Best Director. We got Sean Baker for Nora at 63%, leading the way. Brady Corbett for The Brutalist at 35%. And then there is a little 2% on Mangold from A Complete Unknown. But this is basically between Baker and Corbett. There's no conclave here, which again, I think is interesting. And even if it shouldn't, could influence the preferential ballot and maybe even some of the other categories. But that being said, I know you do like a long shot, or you like the plus money with Corbett for director for this one.
Yeah, I can set the stage here a little bit again. I mentioned the tide turning against The Brutalist for Best Picture there in like mid to late January. It did so to an even more extreme degree for Best Director. On the day the Oscar nominations came out, Brady Corbett was around a minus 700 favorite to win Best Director. Sean Baker was around plus 550. The Directors Guild Awards happened, went to Sean Baker, surprised everyone, completely flipped the odds. Sean Baker has been the favorite ever since. My point of contention with anointing Baker because of his DGA win is that there are other data points you can look at that point to Baker. It's true, or I'm sorry, that point to Corbett. It's true that 19 of the last 21 DGA Best Director winners went on to win the Oscar. However, only 2 of those 19 did so without winning another televised award, which would be the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, the CCA. Sean Baker didn't win any of those awards. The 2 examples, the 2 outliers were Tom Hooper for The King's Speech and Alejandro Iñárritu for Birdman.
Great movie. Love that movie.
Yeah,
so underrated.
So again,
like the best actress alive.
Yeah,
it's got to shout out that movie. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. It's amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, Baker won at the DGA. Corbett has wins at the Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, the IPA Satellite Awards, and he won the Silver Lion at Venice, at the Venice Film Festival. Those data points matter. That's people who are part of this voting body as well. And it's enough to make him around a coin flip, maybe even the favorite here, even if you factor in that the CCA, the Critics' Choice Awards, went to neither of these guys. It went to John M. Chu for Wicked, who's not nominated in this category. I think that the Academy is more likely to award directors who are of films that they see as technical achievements. Honora is an actor-driven movie. Conclave is an actor-driven movie. The Brutalist is an epic. It's this grand, picturesque. You got to see it on the big screen, loud, booming theatrics. It's like insane, and that's the kind of thing I think the Academy is more likely to reward. So I am taking a shot here on Corbett on The Brutalist at plus money. I do want to shout out 2 models that I rely on quite a bit. Experts and editors at Gold Derby, I think, are very worth relying on. I love that Chris does it. I love that we have different ways of looking at this instead of just us agreeing on everything, because that would be no fun. Ben Zausmer of the Hollywood Reporter, he comes out with an Oscar model every year. He wrote a book on Oscar modeling. He has this at 35% for Baker and 30% for Corbett. The fact that he has the favorite only at 35% is kind of telling. And then there's another kind of less known model that I found a couple of years ago. I want to shout him out. His name is Cole Curtis. He has his own Oscar projection blog. Very accurate, kind of inspired by Ben Zausmer, who's been doing this for a number of years. He actually has Corbett at 55% for this, and Baker all the way down at 26%. I think that uncertainty, plus the kind of non-quantifiable elements that I talked about with the type of movie that The Brutalist is, are enough for me to be worth backing Corbett here at anything plus money, because I think he should be the favorite.
And I actually promised to the listeners, we're not going to be disagreeing for the entire podcast. Like, we actually do agree on a lot of these. It just so happens that these 2 are kind of correlated and wide open. But surprise, surprise, I do disagree a little bit. I think, and don't get me wrong, I can never knock taking the plus money side when you do think it's a toss up. I just don't think it's a toss up. And the reason is because, and one of the reasons why I do find, Gold Derby so valuable and kind of using that as a starting and sometimes ending point is because just like you've been poring over this stuff, just like Ben, shout out to him, interviewed him once for a serious show I did back in the day. So he's very sharp, and I've read his book multiple times over, Oscar Metrics. So, but the experts, the editors, all these people, they know all this information. It's already priced in. And 91% now, and this has been going up, of experts are still picking Baker for Anora. And going back, as long as we have data tracked, that's all the way back to 2011. So 13 Oscar seasons, no film has lost in the director category with anything less than 83%. So 91, unless there's like a last second change in these coming days, I'm sticking with my pick. You made a really convincing case on your end as well, but I'm rolling with Baker. And I was laughing because one thing we should also point out is you mentioned these films that kind of this category kind of leans toward the technical achievements. I will say Baker did get that editing nom too, right? What was it? No, what was it? The production nom? He got one of those technical nominations. There was one of those technical nominations and that's kind of like unheard of for a director. So this is like not your everyday situation, I think. But I hate taking like the juiced up side of this. But just from everything I've seen on my end, I do think this is a pretty convincing favorite. So, but it's all over the place, and that you can't deny. Like depending on which model you're using, like you said, there's a bunch of models that would say there should be no favorite. So can't knock the plus money side, but that's who I'm kind of rolling with. And I do think the way I have it kind of playing out is, at least I hope, is Conclave kind of gets the upset in Best Picture, and Anora takes director, and everyone's kind of satisfied with their vote. But that just comes from like reading some of those, what do you call it, those blind, I don't even know if they're real. Side note,
anonymous ballots.
Are those real? Like when they kind
anonymous ballots,
anonymous voter number 8. Are those even real? Or they just publish like like the way sometimes you do a mailbag episode and there might be a question or two that
I'm pretty sure they're real. I think it's in the same way that like MLB Hall of Fame voting voters reveal their ballots ahead of time. They just, Oscar voters aren't allowed to reveal their name, I think. But yeah, I as far as I know, they're real. But the problem is, if you see 30 of them, that's out of a couple of thousand voters, so right. How big of a data point can that really be?
No, it's just something that I've heard over and over in general, of not even specific to this year, is that sometimes when there's a split, it's like, okay, well, I honored this film in this category, so I feel more comfortable going against it in this category. And usually it just doesn't line up to where it's very significant. But for this year, I do think it is fairly significant, just because you do have one of the leading contenders for Best Picture not in the director category, which is usually very predictive. But more recently, especially with the preferential ballot, we've started to see just some of those films that you would just call kind of like good films, or things they thought were good films, went out in those things. So it's definitely up in the air. These two categories, unlike some years, are very bettable. So take your pick. You can take my side, Collin's side. You can take both, but you're gonna win somehow. I guarantee that.
Yeah. I have no problem with the Baker pick. I think it's close to a coin flip. I won't be shocked if Baker wins. I just think there's value on Corbett at plus money. I did think it was interesting. I hadn't really thought a ton about the Conclave no Best Director nom. I wish I had the hard data in front of me, but I remember it being a big deal when Argo won Best Picture, because Ben Affleck wasn't nominated for Best Director. That was, I believe, like the first time ever that a Best Picture winner didn't have a Best Director nom. I don't know if it's happened since then, but Conclave would fall into that category.
I got you with some data. So Going back to 2009 with The Hurt Locker, which is 15 years. 12 of the 15 have gotten a director nom. However, if you look over the last 6 years, that's only 4 out of 6. So there's been two times where it has it, Green Book and Coda. And I think, that this is kind of a similar situation where you didn't really see, Green Book's director. I believe it didn't get a director nom either, or it definitely didn't win. It wasn't a major factor. And same thing for Coda, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's like that kind of film that would that tends to win. And I see Conclave in kind of that same light. Like it's just it's a good film. We know it's a good film, even if you don't necessarily want to. It's not among the top 5 in terms of direction. So this is one of those years where it's definitely, there are going to be some surprises at whether it's in these 2 categories, and that could extend outward. So let's get on to actor, and this is one where The Brutalist is a clear favorite due to Adrian Brody, who and one of my favorite actors, I will say, and this is an interesting. So I'll start us off here because I like Timothée Chalamet at plus 150. He's about 32% on KALSHI. Brody's at 67%. So 2-man race, essentially. And there's a lot of history and trends at play here that I don't think they're going to influence the voters, but it's not out of the question. But Chalamet, if he won here, he would actually dethrone Adrian Brody as the youngest winner of this award. However, there's some things going to get a lot going against him too. Brody, essentially was on his way to sweeping until Chalamet wins the SAG Award, which was the most recent. So at the same time, the SAG Award is on a 3-year winning streak of predicting the eventual Oscar winner. But then counterpoint to that, it's pretty much unheard of to only win the SAG and not have won any of those other awards. So it's just one of those kind of weird, another one of these weird situations. But I do sense that The Brutalist could be on somewhat of a Amelia Perez type, fall here, because we are kind of seeing the signs, with just like, I know Timothée Chalamet was great. I think he is deserving of the award, but it's like Brody had all the momentum, and it just, the SAG is, it should have been a foregone conclusion, and it wasn't. So that just kind of has my eyebrows raised. And shout out to our guy Collin Wilson, who has done a bunch of these with me as well, with us, as well. He was telling me that the one Oscar bet I had to make, he was telling me this last July, was Timothée Chalamet in this Dylan flick. So no matter what is going to happen, I have to bet Chalamet everywhere. I've already max bet him everywhere. The odds are pretty fair. It's not a major edge here, and I think you're going to kind of talk about that, but I do think there is enough smoke here with The Brutalist kind of trending downward, and Brody maybe being a victim of that. And also Chalamet was just really good in his role. So rolling with Chalamet here as that, about plus 150 you could get him at on normal odds, about 32% on KALSHI. What are your thoughts, Collin?
I started laughing. I had to stifle some laughter there a little bit through, because I didn't know this. You mentioned Collin Wilson telling you 6 months ago to bet Chalamet. Yep. That's because I told Collin Wilson to bet Chalamet 6 months ago.
Oh my goodness. You Collins, man. You just, what? Like, come on.
I texted him.
Communicate better here. No.
Yeah,
either way,
I know.
Point taken. Yeah. I did. But I mean, you or he or whoever it was make great points about,
I just have a vivid memory.
Figure, there's a lot of reasons. So why don't you kind of talk about it? I know you're kind of waiting for a certain number, but make the case for Chalamet here.
Yeah. so I saw this coming back in the summer, just not to toot my own horn, but they
Dude,
rushed this film to come out in 2024. In July, I was all over Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing. That seemed like the perfect Oscar movie. The Brutalist wasn't really on my radar yet. And then I'm blanking on the production company for A Complete Unknown. They announced in July that A Complete Unknown's coming out this year, and it's coming out on Christmas Day. And I go, oh my God, they think they have a piece of Oscar bait on their hands. They think that they're going to get Timmy a gold statue. So, they didn't come out with odds that second, but I was like, he's going to be up there among the contenders come showtime. And sure enough, here he is. Now, this played out exactly like I thought it was going to. And I bought in on KALSHI on Brody probably around when Oscar nominations came out. I bought him at 56%. And what I expected to happen was that Brody would clean up most of the precursor awards. But I was very confident that the SAG would go to Timothée Chalamet. Because Timothée Chalamet is your quintessential like geeky theater kid that his fellow actors love. Like he's like the male Emma Stone. You see Emma Stone winning all these awards because
hey, no, let's not go that far. I hold
this
Emma
is not
Stone,
criticism.
like, Emma Stone is like on the Mount Rushmore with like 3 more Emma Stones to me. Like you cannot.
These are do not take these as criticisms. I love
like,
both actors.
Like, you can't don't do that.
But so my whole idea was I was going to cash out on Brody right before the SAGs at KALSHI. He was at around 80% of the showtime, but I got greedy. I was like, nah, Brody might win the SAGs. I'm going to hang on to this. He didn't. Chalamet was won. I was right, but then I was wrong. So I'm sitting on this Adrian Brody position, and I'm just going to ride it out and see if he wins. All that said, I do think that there is a pathway here to Chalamet winning. I do wish the odds were a little bit longer. I wish I had bet him before the freaking SAG Awards like I thought I was going to, like I wanted to. You mentioned the difference between the SAG and the Oscars, the fact that the SAG is on a 3-year winning streak in predicting the Oscars. It goes back even further than that. Only twice since 2004 have the SAG and the Academy picked a different Best Actor. It was 2020, famously Chadwick Boseman was awarded posthumously by the Screen Actors Guild. Everyone thought he was going to get coronated at the Academy as well. They went with Anthony Hopkins instead.
One of the greatest Oscar moments of all time, too. Like,
yeah,
obviously not, no disrespect.
They closed the freaking show with it, thinking
like
it was going to
the chaos of it all, which is like,
and it was the
by the way, Hopkins. All right, we're out. Bye.
Yeah, and it was the COVID year. They weren't in the Dolby Theater. Yeah. It was a fucking mess. And then 2016 was the other. The SAG went with Denzel Washington. The Academy awarded Casey Affleck. So it's possible. But yeah,
what you're telling me is definitely fade Colin Domingo.
Yes.
Might have to cut that one out, Matt. But
but yeah, the SAG obviously carries the most weight. The SAG carries the most weight in all of the Oscars because it's the biggest voting body among all Oscars voters. There's more actors than there are camera operators and directors. So I like Chalamet. If I had no position going into Sunday on this, I would be betting Chalamet 100% for sure. Wish it were a little longer. I will say that there's a different way to approach this, and it's via one of the exotic markets that is currently offered at FanDuel. They're offering over under 4.5 first-time Oscar winners among the director and actor awards. So that's five categories: director, best actor and actress, best supporting actor, supporting actress. Over under 4.5. That basically is just a bet on best actor. Best director is guaranteed to go to a first-time winner, Baker, Corbett. Best actress, which we're going to talk about in a minute, Demi Moore or Mikey Madison, both first-timers. And then the two runaway favorites in the supporting actors are both first-timers. So if you're betting over 4.5 first-time winners, you're betting on Chalamet. If you're betting under 4.5, you're betting on Brody. So over 4.5 is plus 105. Under 4.5 is minus 165. And so if you're looking to make money on Adrian Brody, if you think he's going to win this award, you go with the under, because minus 165 for under 4.5 is a bet on Brody when Brody's sitting in the minus 210 or longer range. So if you like Brody, bet that market if it's available to you. I personally am not going to have any extra stake on this award because of my previous stakes, but Chalamet is the value play here because of the momentum off the SAG win, and again the fact that he's a darling of the Academy. I think that they love him. They want to give him his award finally. Brody already has one. So yeah, Chalamet plus money is probably the way to go.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, I've there's been years where I've ended up on, some of the chalk, and I just haven't liked it as much. I do think that these kind of betting these kind of markets generally lends itself toward just finding the value on those underdogs, even if the true odds don't line up exactly, or maybe you're only showing like a 1% or 2% edge or something like that. Because if you're doing it consistently, you do know there are going to be probably 5 or 6 upsets, scattered through, and you're unlikely to just keep go over whatever, because these are a lot. There is a very good case for, I think, a lot of these I guess underdogs, so to speak. So yeah, that's the way I've been approaching this award season. I think there's maybe like one or two, I think, a director and maybe one other one, really the only ones where I found myself going with anyone that is juiced up, past even money or whatever not. But let's jump into Best Actress. Demi Moore, the leader, the favorite at 67% on KALSHI. Mikey Madison of Honora at 27%. And you do have some love for Fernanda Torres, who I think was great. And probably just an unfortunate year where I do think there's just so much support for Demi Moore. But I actually have sprinkled a little bit on Torres just because, again, I think Moore should be the favorite, but I do think Torres is a little bit undervalued. And if you take name recognition out of the equation, I do think that Torres was just as good and probably better in I'm Still Here than Demi Moore was in The Substance. And she was great too, but obviously. But how are you kind of approaching this market?
Yeah, so I've been on Demi Moore for quite a while. I do think there's still value on her. I have a pretty firm position she's going to win this award. The Academy, as much as they love their new kids on the block, like I mentioned with Chalamet, they love their career achievement awards. Mm-hmm. Demi Moore's been around forever. The Substance is a fucking insane movie. If you haven't seen it, it's absolutely batshit crazy, and she's phenomenal in it. And it's kind of a lifetime achievement award in a sense. She's had this career, she's had her ups and downs. She kind of went off the radar for a long time, and now she's back with a film like The Substance. The Fernanda Torres is interesting. I'm with you on taking a sprinkle on her, especially now that she's at 16-1. She's kind of had a roller coaster ride. Right before the Golden Globes, she was 28-1. Then she won at the Golden Globes. They have 2 acting categories. They have the comedy / musical, and then the drama. And after she won, she went to plus 430 for Best Actress. So there was a lot of momentum on her, despite the fact that the Golden Globes isn't a great predictor. It was odds makers and bettors reacting to the first major award show of this season. She hasn't won anything since then, so she settled a little bit back in the 14 to 16-1 range, which I think is where you find value in her. The interesting thing with her is that she has, at none of these award shows has she been nominated against Mikey Madison and Demi Moore. Now that you could read that as not a good sign, because she hasn't been nominated in a lot of these these other award shows, but I'm Still Here was also a surprise Best Picture
Yes.
nominee. So the
Yes.
Academy clearly has an affinity for it. I was tracking Oscar odds before nominations came out, and for Best Picture, my list went about 30 movies deep. Because I didn't know what it was. It was the top 30 odds I was tracking. I'm Still Here was not one of the top 30 at the time.
Wow.
It was not listed among. I went down to 65-1 odds for Best Picture, and I'm Still Here wasn't on there. And now it's up for Best Picture. It's not going to win. The point is, the Academy clearly loves that movie. We're going to get into it even more with Best International Film a little bit later in that fascinating race. But the other sense of this, the flip side of the coin with the Torres argument, is it seems a lot like the Sandra Hüller juice that we saw last year. People were seeing her as kind of a stealth underdog. Obviously didn't play out. And again, unlike sports, we can't look and be like, well, she almost won. We don't know. She could have gotten 10 votes. She could have gotten 5,000 votes. We have no idea. And that'll be the case here with Torres. I think that she's a stealth underdog in the sense that she might be making this a little bit closer of a race. It's interesting that both of us agree that there's no value here on Mikey Madison, who would also, I believe, be in the conversation for youngest winner if she got it. She's a breakout star. I think we're going to be seeing her in everything soon. But yeah, career lifetime achievement award for Demi Moore. Very firmly of that belief. I think still has value even in the minus 250 range where it's at right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm glad you pointed out the Best Picture nomination, because that what I found, beyond just breaking down the data, but actually just looking back at what I happened to be most surprised by in terms of upsets, looking back at some of the awards in years past, the thing that tends to stand out is when you have a film that's either nominated for Best Picture outright, it tends to win in other categories. Because again, they want to award the film somehow, but especially when it's an international film, that also gets that nomination in Best Picture. I think we tend to really underrate those films and just how much the Academy enjoys those films. And I do think, and it's no slight to Mikey Madison, but I do think the fact that, Torres is, an industry veteran, just like Demi Moore. Now, obviously, the name recognition not anywhere in the same ballpark, but it's the difference between being a veteran and a predictor. I think if I'm a predictor and I'm just trying to hit the winner, obviously it's Demi Moore, but do I think there's a greater chance than 16-1 that we see an upset? Absolutely. So that'll be my play.
The crazy Torres stat before we move on, that you probably know, maybe the listeners don't, is that she's the second ever Brazilian woman nominated for Best Actress, and the first was her mother.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting history and trends and things going on and wide open races in this Oscars. So this should be one of the better ones. It's gotten a little weird at times over the past few years for various reasons, and I think our collective attention spans are less so. But this one definitely, I think, has some juice to it. Now, speaking of juice, we can just fly through the two supporting actor and actress categories because they aren't really bettable, in my opinion. If you look at supporting actor, Kieran Culkin, a real pain, 95% on KALSHI. This is a Succession category, I guess. You have Culkin and you have Jeremy Strong as the top two. Jeremy Strong, of course, for The Apprentice. And then in the supporting actress category, Zoe Saldana running away with it at a 92% favorite on KALSHI. And some ridiculous numbers if you're just using American odds at any of those sites. So, nothing to add there, right? This is what it's going to be. It's going to be Saldana. It's going to be Culkin.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is it's nice that we've gotten to a point finally where we can skip through these. We talk about last year's show, and uh, best picture, best director, best actor were all locked up at the time that Oscar predictions were being made. We just got through the first four. We talked a shit ton because none of those races are clear cut. Of the top six, only these two are locked up. Culkin's winning, Saldana's winning. We can move on. If you're doing a pool, whatever, just mark those two and don't give it a second thought.
Yeah, so let's go right into screenplay. Start with best original screenplay. This is one where Anora is the favorite, but you do have some challengers here. And this is one where, there are four films that I've caught. Four out of the five do have backing from the Gold Derby, whether it's the expert. Four films have backing from the experts. Anora, then you have The Substance, A Real Pain. So The Substance is about 3-1, A Real Pain 5-1, and The Brutalist still sticking around. I think it has one expert vote still. Now that's probably, I could see that changing. So I do think it kind of comes down to, does Anora get upset here? And if it does, by whom? And I think the value is on A Real Pain. It's 5 or 6-1. I'm not holding my breath. I don't know how you feel about this, because I still think, Anora, strong position, still the most likely best picture winner. And if you look back on Gold Derby, the only two upsets have been undervalued best picture winners. It was Everything Everywhere All at Once and Green Book in this category. And they ended up winning, even though they weren't the favorite. And then they went on to win best picture. But that just points to Anora winning this category, because Gold Derby is predicting it to be upset. It's not as much of a sure thing as maybe it seems. So I do think there's a little value though on A Real Pain. That's what we see in the Gold Derby predictions, and that just, when you look at 5 or 6-1 odds, and it's essentially in the third place slot, whereas Gold Derby's treating it more like the most likely one to upset Anora. I do think it's worth a sprinkle, but this is admittedly not one of my favorite long shot plays. What about you? What do you think here?
We align on A Real Pain being it's A Real Pain or nothing, essentially,
Yeah.
as a bet. The couple interesting data points here. You mentioned the best picture parallel. On the flip side, and a point against A Real Pain is that a film hasn't won this category without being nominated for Best Picture since Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind 20 years ago. Anora and The Substance are Best Picture nominees. A Real Pain is not. So that makes it tough. Usually there is a strong parallel between the winner in this category and at least being nominated for Best Picture. Another thing that makes this interesting is the way that some of these precursor shows qualify films for or eligibility, let's say. So, for example, Anora won at the Writers Guild. That's one of the main reasons that it's favored here. The Substance wasn't eligible for Best Original Screenplay at the WGA. So Anora and The Substance didn't go head to head there. And Anora's had quite a few losses. They lost at the Golden Globes to Conclave. That was a combined category at the Golden Globes. Conclave is nominated in adapted screenplay, but it didn't win there. The Critics' Choice Awards, The Substance beat Anora head to head, and at the BAFTAs, A Real Pain beat it head to head. So I think there's a really good shot here for an upset. This isn't my best bet by any means. Both of the models I've referenced earlier, Ben Zausmer, Cole Curtis, have Anora as the favorite, but at 40 and 44% respectively. Curtis has a Real Pain at 39% as the most likely challenger. Zausmer has The Substance at 28% and A Real Pain at 11%. Zausmer actually has A Real Pain behind The Brutalist, which is kind of interesting to me. But even still, given the points in the other model, I think that I will be betting a little bit on A Real Pain at the plus 500 to 600 range. It's either bet that or pass on this category, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to, why some people might be listening and maybe you're just more of an Oscar betting fan. You're not really familiar with the thought process that goes into making wagers and deciding how you're going to play these markets. So what the reason why I think we should be betting a real pain is because, again, it has this support from these Gold Derby experts, and they know all this stuff. Like, they know that, just like I, and you both, we could kind of talk ourselves out of it and into Nora very easily. They know that too. They could do the same, and there's still a lot more support for it than in the market at large, and they're the experts. And so you're gonna lose more. You're gonna miss out on gains, to put it, in kind of a stock market way terminology. You're gonna miss out on gains if you're not taking advantage of these spots, because remember, 6-1, 5-1. You only have to win once out of every 5 times. You only have to win once out of every 6 times to break even on a bet like that. So will it win every time? Will every one of these go your way? Absolutely not. But there's only 23 categories. This only happens once a year. If this is your thing and you're sitting here listening to us fools ramble about it for an hour or probably longer at this point, I think you should be taking these long shots, these shots here. And that's why we do this. So that's kind of why we're saying, hey, it's not the most likely a long shot to hit, but there's definitely value there, and there is a case for it. And that's how you got to look at each of these categories. So with that being said, we can move to adapted screenplay. That's another quick one. I think you have in our outline written Conclave is winning. So pretty cut and dry here. Minus 1100 in the betting markets. There's no real I think challenger or way that it gets upset here. I think it's pretty good bet. And I will say this, it is the overwhelming favorite among the experts and everyone else at Gold Derby as well. There has not been an upset in this category since the aforementioned Birdman or the unexpected virtue of ignorance upset Grand Budapest Hotel, and that was in 2014. So it's been a decade. This one tends to be an easy one to call, and I don't think this year is going to be any different. All right, great stuff, Collin. Again, you can find him on all social media at Whitchurch. That's going to wrap it up for our major categories, but don't worry, we will be right back here, because as you can tell, we got a lot of bets here, and we didn't even get to the most fun categories because there are some juicy long shots and some great odds to bet. So we'll have a whole second episode where we touch on every non-top 8 category that we're betting, which is pretty much almost all of them. So you want to go check that out. And be sure, if you're into betting, download the free award-winning Action Network app as well. It's really awesome. You can follow expert picks. You can track your own. Great app. But for Collin Whitchurch, I'm Chris Raybon. Until next time, let's get this money.